Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I will call our Bloomington City Council listening session to order. Tonight is Monday, April 27th. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We've had two people call ahead asking to speak, Tim Ekstrom and Robin Mullock. Robin? No, Robin. So those were the only two who called ahead. Were you hoping to speak this evening, Mark? Others?
I'm with Tim.
You're with Tim. Neither of you two? All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll start with Tim. And if we have others show up, Robin shows up or others, we will talk to them. But if you could please come up and I think the microphone is on and speak into the mic, please, and identify yourself. And what we typically do is we usually parse out the time for everybody, but we'll what we usually do if there's not enough people to fill the time, we basically say, we're not going to let you go longer than 10 minutes, but we'll
Oh, that'll be
we'll have a conversation.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
Welcome.
I'm Tim Engstrom. I'm the gambling manager for the American Legion and the adjutant, soon to be again. But the VFW also said that I can speak for them as well. I wanted to point out, I've been a journalist since I went to Iowa State, graduated in 1997. I've covered a lot of cities. City council member. He stopped at my doors. Appreciate it. I want to point out that the community survey about the charitable fund, asked the city whether they ought to set up a charitable fund and, require charitable gambling organizations to contribute. Why did they avoid the word tax? The word tax is not anywhere to be found in there. A tax would be onerous. And would take away from many of the programs we support. We just went through this 3 or 4 years ago, and the city council declined at that time to take it up, and it seems like pretty soon to come back to the same issue that we just decided not to do. If we implement this tax, the Legion help the city, parade in the city, the mayor speak at it. We have a Veterans Day appreciation dinner that the Legion pays for. It's at the city function, but we basically fund it. And we have helped the city with the Veterans Memorial, and we are happy to help the city with other projects. We helped Summerfest. A couple of years we were trying to buy a van so we can take our honor guard places and veterans to events like Veterans Day on the Hill. But we have consistently funded fireworks and contributed to Summerfest, and we were already in talks to do it again this year. So, we have a strong municipal pride, and we want to support programs. It is my belief that the city can request funds. They don't need to mandate it. If there's a basketball court or something that the city really has its heart set on, batting cages for Red Hat Ox Field, you can ask licensed charitable organizations to donate to it within the city. In fact, the League of Minnesota Cities says so on its website. And I've asked for clarification from the research team because I've lived in other cities and they do it. Home rule cities, just like Bloomington. They did it. The school district does it. Other cities do it. I know a network of people who live across the state through the American Legion, and they've never heard of a city not being able to request funds for programs that are, as long as they are in the public interest, like offsetting poverty, park equipment, maybe it's a youth program, but it's not going for water bottles that say the city of Bloomington. There are some exceptions. Like I know in gambling, I cannot donate to law enforcement agencies, and law enforcement agencies cannot request charitable gambling. But the Parks Department can, So I think we need to revisit, talk to the League of Minnesota Cities and revisit this issue about how we can raise some funds for some projects in Bloomington if we want to help fix up the animal shelter and things like that. I wouldn't want to have to be able to say that we can't give to any local governments anymore. Like the school district says, hey, we need some help with coaches' headsets or some other thing that the high school senior class party. Oh, go talk to the city. They've got your money. That's what I'm gonna have to say. They took it from us, now we can't afford to give it to you. We give out lots and lots of scholarships. Go talk to the city, they've got your money. I want to remind you that Anoka this past month implemented this same 10% tax. And it had such a community outcry that last week the city council repealed it. So you will see the same thing if we do this here. I think a lot of people aren't quite aware of it. That survey, I understood what it said, but we already paid 33% to the state government. And the next highest state is New York with 5%. The city taking 10% makes it 43%. Nearly half of our hard work would be taken by officials who did 0% of the work to earn it. I work hard for raising this money. Many of our people are volunteers, like with BCAF, the Bloomington Kennedy Activities Foundation, and Legion Baseball. You would be essentially taxing volunteer labor. So I hope that makes you feel good. One option in the survey called for requiring organizations to have a certain number of members live in Bloomington. And I'm sure Post 550 would pass this test, but I want to point out that this requirement would be unconstitutional. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled consistently that government cannot compel organizations such as churches and civil groups to turn over their membership list or donor list to or their addresses. The most notable landmark case is NAACP versus Alabama. You can remember your civil rights movement schooling. In 1958, the Bloomington city clerk already has tried to compel me to turn over the individual addresses of our honor guard members, which is a violation of the Constitution, and she should move it. I do support having the ordinance requiring the licensed nonprofit to be based in Bloomington or at least the trade area. We have far too many out-of-town gambling operations in our fair city. I'm glad that this is being addressed. So, you know, we have like the Minnesota Youth Athletic Services. They do Cowboy Jacks, and they do the new place that used to be Quattro Mill Pass. But I saw their annual report, and I could not make heads or tails of what is exactly going into Bloomington or not. So I do commend the city clerk for trying to do a deep dive on some of these city reports that get filed annually. And I told her that I'm really glad that she is looking into this because, you know, we do our best at the Legion to be among the best in the state for following the rules. The ACM often asks me to testify at the legislature. You know, we have a reputation for doing things correct and above board and transparent within the Legion here in town. But I do think we have some people whose reports aren't necessarily as above board as ours. And in fact, ours is at 70%. I don't really support a measure to increase the 60% threshold when we as a city just increased it from 30% about 3 or 4 years ago. Why revisit this already? We give it 70%, and ours is probably really 80%, except our accountant sometimes classifies some of the scholarships as outside because the kid might live in Iowa City, and the accountant doesn't know that this person's connected to someone in Bloomington. So if I really got on them, I could get them to up it higher, but I let it go because we're already passing. We do help in some ways in the region. Like we fund the bingo at the Minneapolis Veterans Home. There is no veterans home closer than the Minneapolis Veterans Home. I'm sure there are some Bloomington veterans in that veterans home. And they have bingo. They play like quarter bingo. We donate $2,000, and over the course of the year, that quarter bingo gets spent. And maybe it even takes a 1.5 to 2 years sometimes to get spent. And then we reimburse the fund. And our volunteers go over there to help run the quarterly, you know. So this is outside of our trade area, but I think it's a valuable thing that helps the region. We donate to every third Saturday. How many people have heard of that? It's in South Minneapolis, outside the trade area. And I'm sure there are people from Bloomington and Richfield who use their services. And I think it would be a shame if we had a situation where we can no longer help them. We also donate to a fund that is the Minnesota Veterans Assistance Fund for veterans are in places that they don't have the means to get the help like they do in Bloomington. I have been asked by the city previously, there was a veteran who was going to be homeless if they didn't catch up on the rent. They had the Bloomington social worker, and we kept that person from going out on the streets. We've helped people who lost their apartment to fire, and it wasn't their own fault. The apartment next door caught on fire to theirs, and they had to have shelters some. We've helped veterans in town that have been talked to us by the Hennepin County Veteran Service Office. Is another example of, here's the county asking for gambling dollars to help somebody. So, and as you know, it's easier to prevent homelessness than to fix it. There's oodles of other stories that I won't spare you. I won't go into it, but I do believe there is no need to change the 60% threshold, even though I myself may not be able to be affected by it. I do think there is a place for helping things within the region. And I hope that you trust our judgment to decide that overall that we're trying to do what's best for Bloomington and the Bloomington area. That's it.
Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. And a couple of things. I fully acknowledge that the Legion VFW Club, you guys do great work in town. So thank you so very much for the outreach that you do and the work that you do and the services that you provide. And just to being a presence in this community like few other organizations really are. You're a great presence. I won't dispute that at all. I also want to clear up for some of the newer council members, if you haven't heard, we did talk about this 3 or 4 years ago. You'll hear more later this evening. It's a study session item that we've got tonight where we're starting the conversation about this, about possible changes to our charitable gambling rules and regulations and distributions and so on. It's not a public, which is why Tim is here speaking tonight, because he wanted an opportunity to give us a little bit of background. If it does advance and if we direct staff to move forward, I mean, ultimately, yes, it would go to a public hearing, much like it did. I don't even remember when it was when we talked about this last. You're right. It was like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, as I recall.
Yeah.
So if it ultimately did get to that as a public hearing, we'd expect to hear from you again. And I'm sure a lot of other folks as well.
Yeah.
So, but I appreciate your input. And I appreciate the perspective that you bring. And as I said, I appreciate the great work that you folks do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Dellison, really quick.
While you're here, you can probably weigh in on something else. Another item on the study session tonight that you may have an opinion on that I'd love to hear a perspective on is we don't have any mechanism to take away that right from somebody if they violate something or anything. There's nothing in the process that allows us to say you can no longer be that gambling designation. We're going to have to address something around that too, because, you know, to your point, once you're in there, it's impossible for it to get you out, even if you do violate things. Not that you're guilty of that in any way, shape, or form. Open question to you about whether or not you support that.
I think that's an excellent point. You know, like use the MIAS as the example. What if their turn-in thing at the end of the year is required to file and it's out of, you know, they're only donating 20% within Bloomington, even though the rule is 60% and it used to be 30%, and you're helpless to really do anything about it. Yeah, I support that. The other thing I forgot I should add.
Really quick, we got to wrap up. Yeah, one more, very quickly.
Last time the previous city clerk, when this was under
Serious, they did get all the gambling managers together for a meeting at some point, and I hope that happens.
Yeah, if we move forward, I would expect that there's going to be a lot more outreach other than just the survey that went out and the Let's Talk Bloomington page and that kind of thing. I'd expect there'd be a lot of it. So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you so very much. Thanks. I'll ask once again if anybody else in the room would like to speak on anything. All right. As I said, we had one other person sign up, but now we're 15 minutes in and I don't see that person. So, council, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our listening session and head downstairs for our council meeting.
So, second.
Motion by Councilmember Robertson, second by Councilmember Carter to adjourn this evening. No further council discussion on this. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you so very much. Thank you much, Tim. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on Memorial Day.